I've got the self-portrait here. I've already worked on it a few times before for some demos. I just want to show you now that I'm approaching the end, what I'm thinking about, how I'm going to actually glaze this. So I've made a glazing video in the past, but in this video, I will be showing you what it looks like as you approach the end of the painting. So this will be a little bit different because the painting is further along. I want to, first of all, increase the contrast. That's going to be the absolute biggest thing that I want to achieve here. I do like the contrast that I have, but I want to take it up just a little bit more. I want to have some darker shadows and to really bring out the brightest highlights. What I like that I have is that it's very soft and things are blending together. The unity is quite great, but doing this glaze will also help to ensure that I keep everything unified. I'll glaze the entire painting so that way everything remains unified. So I've sanded this painting down already and you can see everything is quite fuzzy. That's fantastic. I really like that. That's something that I enjoy in a painting, but it needs to be balanced out. I need a few more sharp edges. I need a little bit more contrast. You'll see that it will really be able to improve the whole form. It will make everything more solid, so it will be more balanced out. Right now it's a little bit too soft. So if you're ever unsure about how you're doing as far as contrast goes, as far as your painting goes as a whole, then I highly recommend you look at Rembrandt. So again, it's important to compare. So I just want to show you some things that I'm thinking about when it comes to comparison and really what I'm trying to achieve. So by looking at this, I'm really able to see what needs to be improved. And the things that I'm noticing are all of the things that I've just mentioned, the things that I really want to achieve now. I can see that I need to improve the contrast. I need some darker shadows in order to do that. I need to improve the form a little bit to make it just a little bit more solid. And then I also want to add some more color to the face. I want the face to be just a little bit more warm and to get a little bit more contrast as far as the colors go as well. If I do that, I will be very satisfied with this. So in order to get there, I'm first going to start by glazing. What the glazing is going to do is it's going to enable me to really just cover all of this area and make all of the shadows much darker. So it's going to make it a lot easier. I won't have to do so much thinking, about putting it in one area or something like that. It's just kind of just to jump straight into it, cover it all with a darker glaze, and then I can wipe out where I want to, where I need to, and start to add some of those flesh tones back in, either with this glaze or at a later stage. When I put these side by side, you can really see the difference. You can tell the Rembrandt has a lot more black. Now mine is kind of a summer portrait in a way. There's more light in the background, and that is intentional. But if you just look at the face, you can tell his face is glowing much more. So maybe I need to actually darken the background a little bit, but most importantly, I need to darken those shadows. So that's what I'm looking at when I tell you that I don't have enough contrast. This is what I'm comparing it to. If you're interested in glazing and you haven't seen it already, I have another video about glazing. So I probably say some things in there that I won't talk about here. So feel free to go watch that. I recommend you go watch that. Now I'm going to be more focused on kind of finishing up the painting. And now I'm going to start glazing this painting. Okay, so I've got my brush here. I've got a really warm brown on here. I'm gonna have to see how it actually plays out on the canvas. What I'm thinking about is that I'm going to add a kind of darker brown into the shadow areas and the areas that need to be darker, like right here and in the hair. So I'm just gonna kind of play around a little bit. I want to see how this is. Like I said, I've already sanded everything and I've just got a little bit of oil. I'm using some stand oil, but I would prefer to use boiled linseed oil because it dries faster. It's a better substance. And I'm just gonna place this down here, see how that's doing. That's pretty good. That's about the consistency I want for the face. So I'm just gonna dip right back into that. The main thing that I'm going to be thinking about once I start to remove this and once I actually wipe out is kind of where I want the contrast to be, where I want the focus to be. I'll start to look for some sharper edges. I want to add some more dark paint here in the shadows. So I'm just dipping into the black a little bit more. But this is a pretty simple process. You want to think about what tone you want. Obviously you can change it, you can scrape away. If you really run into a disaster situation, you can add a lot of oil, kind of blend it out so it's almost not even noticeable that you glazed, or you can also use sandpaper back over the top of it. So although this looks quite scary, you might be a little bit nervous to put a lot of paint right on top of your painting like that. It's actually quite easy to remove if you run into problems. It's not too risky. Don't be too worried when you go into this. You want to make sure you get color that you want, or you want to really try to improve the contrast, let's say, then you need to go fairly dark. So that's what I will be doing now. I'm gonna add some more black. So I want all of this, this main body and the head to be covered. You can see right here when I'm going into this part of the flesh, That's really not so problematic. I added a little bit more oil in that area because I don't want that to be so heavily glazed. I'll wipe out most of that, but I do want to cover everything because I want it to become more unified. I want this effect to happen to the entire painting. I don't want it to just happen to the face. So right now, yeah, I'm just going to add some more black in here. And the reason that I'm doing that, I'm going right back on top of this stuff that I already had. I just want to darken it up a little bit. So when I actually go in with my rag and I start to wipe away, I'll have more selection when I go into that area because I can choose, you know, if I want to take this brown, then I'll wipe a little bit lighter over the black, or if I want to actually go all the way back down to the color that I had beneath all of that, I'll wipe even harder. So in a way, the black allows me to get an extra layer in there, kind of get some more choice. And this is looking fine. I mean, it's nothing too complicated here. Something that I could have done, might have been smarter to do this, is that I could have taken the background first and then worked my way down to the face. That way I don't allow the face to dry up before I can get there. What I will do now is I will just go straight into that face with a rag, and I'll kind of get back into the background once I see how this turns out. So I'm just gonna pull down on top of this until I start seeing what's beneath there. I can start to see the outline of the face. I wanna keep going a little bit more. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start kind of emphasizing these lighter areas. I'm gonna press a little bit harder with my rag to get into those areas. But you can see it's starting to get darker. So if you see, this kind of looks like Carrière. So this is just, you know, one of those things you can do when you actually have a glaze. It's a little bit more easy to manipulate, and you can manipulate everything all at once compared to if you're just using your brush and, you know, you're trying to make everything just a little bit darker. You're wasting your time. Just cover it up with a glaze and wipe out and manipulate it that way. You know, this is a lot more efficient. So now I'm just gonna take this stuff that's in the hair, and I'm gonna start blending it into the background. That's just going to give me that beginning to this glaze in the background. I'm gonna see what happens if I just cover everything with this brown glaze. I wanna see how that turns out. So I'm gonna start here at the edge, because that's what I've got on my brush. I've got some darker brown. Gonna put that in place. So some really funny things can happen when you start to glaze like this. You might find some very fun effects that you've never tried before. And what I will say about that is to go into this process, and do this just with painting in general. You should go into the process with a goal in mind. You have something you want to achieve, and you have a sort of plan to achieve it, but you also need to be open when things happen that improve your painting. If you notice that something improves your painting, although it's not something you would typically do, leave it. You know, you can always do what you've been doing, but if you find something that really you know, brings some value to your painting, like right now I think adding this dark background is really bringing some value. So although I intended to have a lighter background, I'm gonna try this out. I'm gonna see how it works. I can always make it lighter in the future if I don't like this. I'm gonna start with the highlights, because I've already got some of this mid-tone kind of wiped out. I wanna see how bright I can make that highlight before it starts to become too extreme. I need to bring the hair down a notch. It's a little too dark. So I know I have some highlights under here. I'm gonna try and uncover those. The great thing about glazing is that you add a layer of transparency. So through that transparency, you're going to be able to see the paint that's underlying that, and you're going to just add another layer. So as you add these transparent layers, you're going to really make something that's gonna glow, it's gonna shimmer with the light. You know, you're going to actually see through those layers in a way. So as you move around, you're seeing through the layers, and the light is just moving in different ways as you move around the canvas. You can see here, this is that one shadow that I was kind of talking about that I really wanted to make darker, that I thought would really help to solidify the face. So that one I'm going to try to leave. I want to keep it quite dark right there, but this other stuff around, I just need to blend out a little bit more, start to create some of that contrast. This is a messy business, so make sure you have plenty of rags. Although there's a lot of strange things going on, this face has become more solid because I've gotten this darkness in the shadows, and everything's become more unified. So this feels a lot more solid. It feels much more grounded than it did before. And at the same time, I'm still able to get some of this fluidity. Like I've got these weird sort of strokes that are going here, and it's actually less defined than it was before in many ways, but it feels more solid. If you haven't seen either the glazing video or the video about using the wipeout method, I highly recommend you go watch one of those videos. I talk more about kind of what I'm doing with the rag and stuff like that. But what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try and blend it out. So I want to get my highlights really bright, so therefore I'll use the rag very harshly. I'll try to pull as much of this glaze away as I can from the highlight, and then as I start to approach the midtones, I'll use a little bit more of a gentle brush, and I'll just try to blend this out until I get to these deep dark shadows where I'm not going to remove it at all. So right there you can see when I go in there with my finger and I press very hard, then I'm getting a very bright highlight. That's great. That's exactly what I wanted out of this. So what I'm going to be able to do now is I'm going to be able to blend this all the way around. Everything's going to be more unified, and I'm going to have more contrast. If you notice, let's say that something looks a little bit weird, like right here, I think I have a little bit too much light. What I can do is I can just take my finger into some of this glaze and just go right back over the top of that. And it's going to create the same effect as what I just did with the glaze. So now I can go back over that, be a little bit more careful, and just blend it out. And another fun thing, if you have something that's quite complex like hair, I can just start to go into this hair and I can just make some of these shapes that I'm seeing here. And I don't have to be very specific, but I'm going to start to get some of those broad shapes in there, and I'll be able to use that in the future. So it just, kind of creates that effect that it's textured like hair. You do have a time limit because this paint is drying on the surface. So there's only so much time where you're going to be able to remove it all. That would be the benefit to using stand oils, that it's not going to dry quite so quickly. But I am taking my distance. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is going to benefit the painting. I want to make sure I'm kind of getting this effect that I want. The goal is going to be that you really want to improve everything in the totality. So in order to make sure you're doing that, you really need to take distance. It's extremely important. So if you don't want to remove a lot of paint, or if you want to kind of blend it out, what you can do is you can take your rag into an area that has a lot of this glaze, and you just kind of rub it over that area. And now you've got a wet rag, so you can go back onto an area that has less paint, and you're going to start to blend that into that area. Really liking how this is turning out. Need a little bit more light on this side. Smooth this out, get that transition a little bit more smooth. Get some more light in the hair. You can see already this has had quite a significant effect on that face. I think the face is much more solid now. The whole painting has become more dark, so that face really takes over. I really like what's going on here. That really improved the painting quite a lot. I want to go back over this a little bit more. So you can do this. You can dip back into your paint, dip back into your oil, go back in with your brush. And what you can also do, let's say if you wanted this to be more blue in the background, I could just dip into some of my Apellis blue, take that into the glaze, and I could just glaze this, and then I will have a sort of blue glaze. So I could also use, this combination and use both at the same time, and I could start going into the shadows with some blue if I wanted to do that. So something to point out here, I have left a lot of the glaze around this edge in these shadows, especially this shadow here, which I intentionally made more black. I've left more of that glaze. I'm just kind of pushing it in with my finger now, and I want to take a little bit right there in the nose. The reason that I left it there is because it's going to increase the contrast. It's going to make those shadows darker. So that's why, in this area, the highlight, that's where I want to take out the most of the glaze, really press in with my rag and pull that paint away. And then in the darker areas, I want to leave it. You can go over it very gently with your rag or even with your fingers. But in order to get the full effect and to kind of make this glaze useful, you need to leave it in some areas. You need to kind of have that goal in mind, and don't be scared to create contrast. I know sometimes it's very difficult. I struggle with it myself, but you really have to be a little bit bold in order to get the best results here. When you're doing this glaze, another very fun thing to do, something that can get some really amazing effects, is to actually take sandpaper on top of this while it's still wet. So I'm going to try that right here. You're going to actually be able to push the paint around to some degree, so you're going to kind of change that direction. You can add some texture like that. I need to soften this up just a little bit with my rag. But what you can do is you can use that sandpaper to actually remove even more of that glaze. You can remove all the way down to the surface underneath, so then you're going to really pull it away and you're going to be able to get some of your sharpest highlights. So if I've got a clean spot here on my sandpaper, I'll show you. Sometimes I like to do this in the highlights. If you take this right on top of the highlight, it will get even lighter. So you see, that part just got a little bit lighter. That's because you're going even deeper. So that's just a fun effect, something I like to do very often when I glaze. Now I'm blending it back out with my finger, bringing a little bit more of that warmth in there. And I like that transition that I'm getting. So I'm going to do the same thing here on the nose. Now I've got some bright highlights right there. Bring my finger back over it to smooth it out a little bit more. So you can tell this stuff in the background here, I don't know if you can tell how it's sticking to the rag, but it's getting a little bit too tacky, so I need to kind of stop here soon. This is what happens if you take too long, is that the glaze will start to become tacky, it will start to stick to your rag too much, and you won't be able to really smooth things out. I'm going to add a little bit more to the hair. I want to paint the hair a little bit to bring this together. And I want to add some highlights. Like I said, here in the hair, you know, this is a really quick way, pretty fun way to start to get some of that texture, get it to look like hair. I'm just taking my sandpaper and I'm just scraping this so that it looks a little bit like my hair. Just follow the pattern that you see, follow the direction there. I am quite happy with how the whole painting is coming along. I'm very happy with how the glaze turned out. And I will make a video in the future about painting the hair, because I think that will be very helpful, very instructful about how to create texture. I have gotten what I wanted out of this glaze. I've created more contrast, really darkened the shadows, created this harsh highlight right here that I really wanted to get with a soft transition down. If you have any questions about the glazing, if you have any questions about finishing up a painting, feel free to send me a message. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.